Good evening. How you doing? Good. For those of you who were expecting to see Pastor Jeff this evening, I'm so sorry. I really am. And I'm not going to tell you that I am not a little nervous about what I'm going to be talking about tonight. My name is Mike Crass. My wife and I have been coming to Yosemite Church for almost 20 years now. I have served on the council. After my first retirement, I actually served on staff here for a little bit of time, and I now serve on the HR committee. I have 3 children, 9 grandchildren. My license plate says 9 times grandpa. In fact, 2 of my grandchildren are here with my wife tonight. And I will tell you that I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing this. And Satan has been, no, I don't. Satan has been whispering in my ear when they asked me to do this. And then after I said yes, he's been whispering in my ear saying, you need to get out of this. Because I'm going to tell you an ugly story, and it's an ugly story about me. It is. It's a story about my sin. It's a story about my failures. It's a story about me not keeping promises that I should have made. I like word pictures, and I was thinking, what would a word picture of this be? You know, Pastor Jeff has been talking about what we need to do, right? To have a godly family and a godly marriage. And I think they go hand in hand. Talked about priorities, right? We certainly have to define our priorities in line of what God says our priorities should be. These are for last week's notes. We need to align our family's activities with God's priorities. Can't just have them there and not apply them, right? Then we need to design ways to reinforce our priorities. We don't want to work against those priorities. And then we need to refine our priorities. So I was thinking that if we do that, we're in pretty good shape. And he's going to continue that series. And it would be like all of you going to a conference or a workshop on living a healthy life. And these 2 beautiful people come out, a man and a woman. And they look like they should be on the cover of a magazine. They're everything you think you should look like. They seem happy. And they say, if you would eat the way we eat and the way we tell you, and you would exercise the way we exercise and the way we tell you to exercise, and you would have the kind of attitude that we have, you could look just like us. And if you don't, you could look like Mike. And that's a little bit what I feel like. So about 25 years ago, Joe could tell you the exact, my wife over there, she could tell you the exact date. We were doing really well. At least I thought we were doing really well. Had a good job, had just gotten a promotion, had a wonderful family, 3 children. They had graduated and gone away to college. One had actually graduated from college. Thought we were happy. Thought I was a good person, a godly person. I'd become a Christian when I was 16 at a Billy Graham crusade in Fresno. Things were going well. We were extremely involved in our church. I was on the governing board. Joe and I had started a young married group that kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in fact, I would joke with the pastor and say, you know, pretty soon we're going to have to switch locations because we did it during the first service because we're going to have more people than you, you know. And that was a prideful thing. I thought I was God's man of might and power. I really did. Was involved in the youth ministry. Took trips with the youth down to Mexico to missions and so on and so forth. And then one day he asked me, the senior pastor did, to come up and be on the platform with him every Sunday. And he said, you can welcome the folks, you can receive the offering, and you can do the announcements. And I think that I have a great sense of humor. Not everybody thinks that. But he just let me do things. And I can remember one time I gave the announcements and I pretended I was Mr. Rogers. Most of you don't know who Mr. Rogers was, but I put on the sweater and I did that. Another time I was a ventriloquist and I did the announcements. And I had people come up and tell me that they came to the service just to hear my announcements. I was a self-proclaimed minister of announcements, and I got prideful. I did. I got prideful, and I turned into the kind of person that I didn't know existed. I was mean. I was unloving. I was impatient. I wasn't the kind of person that God calls a husband, a man, to be. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I wasn't much better with the folks that we hung with. Most of those folks that we were friends with went to church. They were Christians, and I was just as ugly to them as I was my wife. Maybe the best descriptive word I could use starts with a J, ends with a K. There are two letters in the middle, and those are E and R. I was a total jerk. I was. I didn't know how I got there. We were going with some friends to hear an evangelist in Modesto one Saturday night, and we were carpooling. We didn't want to all take separate cars. And I found out later, this is true, that they drew straws. Short straw had to ride with Mike. That's true. It wasn't Joe, my wife. It was me. And finally, Joe got so fed up, and she deserved to be fed up. She did. She did. She got so fed up that she came to me and she says, we can't continue like this. I can't continue like this. Our family can't continue like this. Well, I finally came to my senses, and I thought, well, okay, I'm going to man up and I'm going to fix this. I made it happen in the first place. I'm going to fix it now by myself. That's what men do, right? I'm going to fix it by myself. And so I tried to do that on my own. And we kept spiraling downward and downward and downward. And it got uglier and uglier and uglier and uglier. It was just terrible what was happening. I felt like I had jumped into a whirlpool. And even though I was a lifeguard when I was young and I knew all kinds of strokes, no matter what stroke I tried, I kept going down further. And actually, I wasn't even able to hardly see the surface of the water. One morning I was driving to work, and it was raining very hard. It was down Santa Fe. You guys know where Santa Fe is, right? Down Santa Fe, I was driving to work, raining. It doesn't rain like that anymore, but it was raining really hard. Any law enforcement people here? Okay. I did have both hands on the wheel, and I was not speeding. Certainly wasn't talking on a cell phone. 25 years ago, they really didn't have those things. I think they looked like walkie-talkies. So I was not really doing anything wrong. Next thing I know, I'm going down the wrong side of Santa Fe, kind of cattywampus. I mean, I'm not going straight. I'm just kind of sliding three-quarters sideways. And all I saw were cars coming the other direction. And I knew that there was no way that I was going to avoid them. And at that point in time, I knew I was going to die. I did. And it's funny because, I don't know, I thought about that a lot, but it wasn't like I was screaming at the top of my lungs and panicked. It was kind of, okay, I'm going to die, and it was almost silent in that car. Of course, I guess it would have been because there was nobody else in there with me. And I hit that first car, and it threw my head against the side window. It broke that window, and I lost consciousness. Ended up totaling the car that I was in and 3 other cars. When I regained consciousness, there was rain that was coming in those cracked windows, and there was a gentleman, I don't know his name to this day, and he was laying hands on me, and he was praying for me. I told you before that 3 other cars, and my car was totaled. And the most serious injury was a broken ankle with somebody else. God spared those other people. I don't know how I would have lived with myself if that had not have happened. Took me to the hospital. There was something like 30 stitches they took in the top of my head. I had hair, actually, before that time. I didn't. I was bald even at that time. I thought that it would get me some sympathy. Because I knew the reason that we were not healing. You know what it was? It was my wife's fault. Because she wouldn't forgive me. Now, how shameful is that my sin became her problem? We were seeing a Christian counselor at the time. Joe was going to make sure that we did that, and I went along at first, and then I got tired of them talking about me. That's what I thought, so I quit going. And then I went back because if they were going to talk about me, I wanted to hear what they were saying. So we were in that counselor's office, me looking like Frankenstein, this monster, and Joe said, this was 8 months into our, quote, recovery. And recovery is an oxymoron because we weren't recovering. We were not. And Joe said, I can't do it anymore. I want a divorce. Man, I didn't know how I got there. I really didn't. I didn't want to lose my family. I didn't want to lose my wife. Hadn't acted like that, but I didn't want to do it. And he said, well, that's an important decision. Why don't you, we have an appointment next week. Why don't you go home and you pray about that a little bit more? Okay, that weekend between that appointment and the next appointment, I was home alone. Joe had taken our 2 daughters to a Bible conference over at Mount Hermon, over in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I was cooking. I didn't know how to load a dishwasher or boil water. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be a single man, I better learn how to do that. And so in the middle of that, I can tell you what I was cooking. I was got a recipe. I was cooking vegetables with Alfredo sauce. I can remember that, just like it was yesterday. And it was about 25 years ago. By the way, Joe and I just celebrated August 28th, our 52nd wedding anniversary. Okay. That's a miracle. That is a miracle. So I remember there was kind of a counter area between the kitchen and the family room. And there was time that I had, and I went down to the end of that counter, and I prayed to God like I'd never prayed before. I did. And I asked God to save my marriage. I said, God, you're my last hope. I can't do it. Nobody else seems to be able to do it. The counselor can't do it. You are my last hope. You see, God finally had me where he wanted me to be. I thought I was broken before, but I wasn't broken until that time. You know that praise song that talks about sweetly broken? That's a good place to be. That's where God wants us to be. And God answered that prayer that night. I don't believe he answered that prayer. I know he answered that prayer. And I prayed to God that not only would he save my marriage, and I wasn't going to ask him to have Joe forgive me. I said, I'm not asking for that. Father, what I want you to do is I want you to make me the kind of person that she wants to forgive. That's what I want. And Father, you tell me to go any direction, and I will follow. I will follow. And now there wasn't an audible voice, but if there had been, I wouldn't have been surprised. It was that real. It really was. There wasn't a finger of fire in the sky, but if there had been, I wouldn't have been surprised. I wouldn't have been surprised if there was a burning bush in the kitchen. That's how real it was. God did tell me what took me so long, because I had lots of chances before that to make this right. Joe came home, and you would have thought, and I would have done it before, you would have thought that I would have rushed up to her and said, Joe, I had this wonderful conversation with God, and he's going to save our marriage. He's going to save our marriage. But I didn't do that. I didn't do that because I didn't have to, because I knew that God was going to do that, and I didn't want to use that. I didn't want to manipulate what he had said to me. But she knew that something was different about me. And we started the slow recovery. It didn't happen overnight, because we were close to the pit of hell. We hadn't arrived, but you could see it from where we were. And we slowly climbed out of that. And as I said before, on August 28th, 52 years. Okay? 52 years. So I want to share how I got to where I got and how I got to where I am today. Now, this ring right here, my wedding ring, okay, is not the wedding ring that Joe gave me when we were married 52 years ago. This is a wedding ring that she gave me to replace that one that happened after our recovery. And inside it, and this is not unusual for a ring, there's an inscription in there. And there's a little heart, and then it says Joe, love Joe. But the third thing that's in there is probably the most important thing, and that is still. In spite of what you did, in spite of how you were, in spite of how you acted, in spite of your sin, I still love you. See, I think inscribed on the very heart of God are the words still. Are the words still. And God doesn't throw people on the trash heap. You know, we talk a lot about grace, right? And grace is kind of hard to wrap your brain around, isn't it? I mean, to think of what we do, and God sent his son to die for us. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, right? Right? But I understand grace better than most. And I don't mean that in a braggart way, because I sleep next to Grace every night. Her name is Joe. And so I want to share some things I think that I hope will help you not get to the place that I was. Or if you're there, what can you do to get out of that? And the reason that I finally quit listening to Satan about coming up here and speaking is a verse that's probably been driving Joe and I for the last 20 or so years. And it comes from the book of 2 Corinthians, first chapter, verses 3 through 4. And it says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." Okay? And so I believe, well, it's not a commandment, I don't think. I do believe that God gave us comfort. He gave me comfort. He saved our marriage. And I hate to use the word obligation, but I believe that I need to share that with other people. And we've been doing that for the last 20 years. So let's take a look at betrayal. But before I do that, are we up there? How do I do this here? Is there a little clicker? Or you just do that? What do I do? Oh, here we go. Okay. Betrayal, the enemy of a healthy family. Thank you. We'll talk about personality just a little bit different. You'll understand. For those people that are very concrete, sequential, and linear thinkers, I apologize right up front. You know, in fact, I got my wife over there to tell me when I'm messing up. So betrayal, the enemy of a healthy family. So when we got married 52 years ago, we had vows that we both repeated, right? And these are pretty similar, I think. But let me go ahead, and if you could do that, the next one, please. Okay. In the name of God, I, Mike, and you could substitute your name, take you, Joe, to be my wife, husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish. To love and to cherish. That's what I'm supposed to do. God should be my first priority, right? Pastor Jeff talked about that. But my second priority is what? Is my wife. Not my job, not my friends, my wife. And I did not do that. Until death do us part, this is my solemn vow. So not only did I break my vow to my wife, to Joe, I broke my vow to God. In fact, about 3 years into our recovery, I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and the verse came to me that says that Jesus will never leave us or forsake us, right? So when I was 16, he came and came into my heart, right? And so when I was this jerk, when I was this sinful person, when I was this mean, ugly person, this unloving person, I took Jesus with me. And that was hard for me. That was hard for me to deal with. So what is betrayal? Betrayal is disloyalty, bad faith, deception, the breaking of a promise. I broke that promise that I made before God to my wife. But then you start looking at the Bible, and you look at the people that the Bible describes. And it really is kind of a history of betrayal. Almost every person that you read about in the Bible has betrayed somebody in some shape or form. I mean, it started with who? Adam and Eve, right? God provided this wonderful, wonderful place for them. And they could not eat the apple? I mean, you know, how silly is that? How silly is that? But they betrayed God, didn't they? He gave them a command, and they broke it. Okay? How about Abraham and Sarah? Remember that story? Hey, she's not my wife. She's not my wife. Take it. It's okay. It's okay. I don't have to do that. How about sibling rivalry? Cain and Abel, right? Betrayal. Betrayal. How about Isaac, Esau, and Jacob? Jacob stole what? Esau's birthright. Remember that? He had the pelt because Esau was a hairy guy, you know, and so he betrayed his brother and he betrayed his family and stole that birthright. We all are familiar with David, right? David and Bathsheba. But you know, he was on the other end too with his son Absalom. Remember that? His son betrayed him. Betrayal, betrayal, betrayal. How about Joseph and his brothers? Sold him into slavery. But Joseph had a problem too. Joseph was a little prideful, wasn't he? Wasn't he a little prideful? Probably my favorite because of where I was and where I am is Peter. Now here's a man that was one of Jesus' disciples. And what did he do? First of all, he promises Jesus, I've got your back, right? You don't have to worry about me. Others may betray you, but not old Peter, right? He's not going to do that. He's not going to do that. And then before the cock crows 3 times, what does he do? He betrays him, doesn't he? Or one time he betrays 3, whatever it is. He betrayed Jesus. He betrayed Jesus. And you would have thought that Jesus would have written him off, right? But what did he do? He didn't. In fact, he made him what? The head of his church. God doesn't throw you on the trash heap. Joe and I had a chance about how long? 10 years ago, Joe? Was it 10 years ago to Israel? 10 years ago? Okay. 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 15, I don't know. We went to Israel. And we went to the place on the Sea of Galilee, on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus restored Peter to the ministry. You see, I thought I'd never be able to minister again, given what I had done. And so that was very meaningful for me, because I want you to know that God can restore the years. He can restore what you've lost, the years that the locusts have eaten away. So I don't want you to despair. So what can you do not to be like Mike? What can you do? Well, let me tell you, there are 5 things that I can think of. The first is you need to know where you want to go. And Pastor Jeff talked about that, didn't he? And that has to be a godly direction. Is that not true? You need to know where you want to go. When we had young children, my 2 daughters, I used to read to them every night before they went to bed. And we read this one book. It was the book that they wanted. At least it had 2 stories. You know, you had it this way, and it was Peter Pan. And it went to the middle. And you turned it over on the other side, the back cover, and you went the other way, and it was Alice in Wonderland. And we read that every single night before they went to bed. Not the whole book, but chapters. And I got so tired of reading those books. And I tried to skip pages just to try to get to the end. But they couldn't read, but they'd memorize that stuff. And they'd go, get Dad. Not Grandpa. That's the Dad. You skip that page. So my favorite chapter in that book, because Alice was lost, right? She was lost the whole story. She didn't know where she was. She fell down that rabbit hole. And she gets to this place where there's different roads you can take, right? Not just 4 directions. There's like 10 directions. There's signs going every which way. And Alice needs to ask for directions, right? Just ask for directions. And who did she ask? Do you remember? The who? The Cheshire Cat. Remember that? Parts of them were there and visible, and then they were invisible, and so on and so forth. I don't know what part was visible. When she asked the Cheshire Cat, which road do I take? And the Cheshire Cat has a question for her. Remember what it was? "Where do you want to go?" And Alice answered. She said, "I don't know." And the Cheshire Cat said, "Then any road will get you there. Any road will get you there." And I think in marriages and in families, that's how we treat things. We need to know where we are going. And Pastor Jeff talked about that. So I think you need to decide that. You can even write it down. You can even write it down. So everybody here, I don't mean to be presumptuous, but everybody here has a goal during this Family Matters. In fact, you have a goal in your marriage and in your family. And if you don't have this goal, you need to have it. Okay? I've written it down for you. Your goal is a healthy marriage and family. To have a healthy marriage, it has to be a what? It has to be a godly marriage. To have a healthy family, it has to be a godly family. In fact, we were doing a workshop, Joe and I, and one of the participants came up. She says, "You know what that is? To have a healthy marriage, to have a healthy family, you have to heal thy marriage and heal thy family." I didn't know that it's well, we knew it spelled that, but we hadn't known that particular thing about that word. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about a video series. Joe and I probably 5 or 6 years ago had a Bible study in our house, and actually Debbie Lease was the one that gave us this as a possible thing to do. And it's by Gary Thomas, and it's called Sacred Marriage. It's called Sacred Marriage. And it's just a wonderful video series. I think there's four different series there. And what Gary Thomas says is that we have this unrealistic view of what a marriage should be like. And we look for that soulmate that's going to give us the totality of our happiness, right? That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says that we need to receive our happiness from who? From a relationship that we have with God. Not that God doesn't want us to be happy in our marriage. But if that's a triangle here, right here, with God at the point of that triangle, and both the husband and the wife are trying to get closer to God, what happens to the closeness that they have? They get closer also. Now, Gary Thomas says that what if God's prime purpose for marriage is not to make us happy, he wants us to be happy, but to make us holy. Because you can't fake it in marriage. You can fake it when you come to church, right? You can fake it at work. You can fake it with your friends. You can't fake it in your marriage. You cannot do that. Joe and I faked it at the church. In fact, our church had a program that they had a man of the year and a woman of the year and a family of the year. We were family of the year. We were family of the year. We could fake it. We could fake it. But it was all a lie. It really was. So I want you to ask yourself the question, what is God trying to teach you by bringing these two sinners together and being a man and a wife and a father and a mother? What is he trying to do? He tells a story that I want to share real quickly. He says that if you brought 100 historians together, I'm not trying to be political, 100 historians together and said to rank the presidents in terms of the greatest president we've ever had. He said almost every one of those 100 historians would say that Abraham Lincoln was that person, because we've never had the kind of pressure on our country that we had when Lincoln was president. It was very close not to having the country that we knew it. People in the South certainly didn't like President Lincoln. They hated him, right? People in the North didn't like him much better. They didn't like him much better. And so he had to persevere. If he hadn't persevered, our country wouldn't be what it's like today. Now, I do believe that God has blessed America. I do believe that. I believe that. Now, what if God wanted our country to stay together? But he knew that the president at that time had to learn perseverance. And he thought, by the way, if they said those same historians ranked the worst first ladies, Mary Todd Lincoln would be the worst. She would. She was certified. She spent time in an insane asylum. They said Lincoln used to carry a wad of dollar bills around in his pocket, and for people that quit saying, I can't take her anymore, he'd say, yeah, why don't you stay another week? Let me give you $1. Let me give you $2, because that's a lot of money at that time. They said one time he was meeting with a foreign minister, and she was so ticked at Abe, Mr. Lincoln, she threw a pitcher of lemonade over him. There was a guy that, I guess you could do it at that time, you could walk into the Oval Office, and he came up there and he had been selling some products that they needed to run the White House. And he said, I'll tell you, Mr. President, I am never going to come here again. I have been treated so badly by your wife. I can't stand it anymore. And Lincoln was a tall man. He said he kind of unfolded himself from behind his desk, put his hand on the man's shoulder, and said, son, you've had to deal with her for the last half hour. I've had to deal with her for the last 20 years. So what if God knew that President Lincoln needed to persevere, and he thought, I know how I can teach him perseverance. I can marry him off to Mary Todd, right? I'm not saying that any of you are Mary Todd. What I'm saying is that God can use marriage. God can use marriage to teach us things we need to learn. So we need to know where we're going, and we need to do what Pastor Jeff said. We need to prioritize. We have to have a roadmap. You do that when you drive your car, right? Don't you? You need to have a roadmap for your marriage. You need to talk about that. Psalms 32:8, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go with my eye upon you. So it says we do have a GPS, right? The GPS is the Bible. The GPS is God. Well, instead of Siri, it's the Holy Spirit, right? Number 2, we need to unpack our baggage, okay? All of us bring baggage into a relationship, right? We bring baggage into our family. Did you guys bring baggage? You were probably raised differently, right? You had issues with your family. Did any of you have issues? If you're not saying yes, you're liars. I do know that. Sure, we have issues. And there would be therapists, there would be psychologists, there would be people that are counseling you that would say, leave your baggage at the door. Do not bring it into your marriage. I would respectfully disagree with them. Don't leave it at the door. Bring it in and unpack it together. Because you can bury things like that, but you know what happens? You bury them alive, and they will come back to haunt you later on. They will. Let me give you an example. Something that we didn't unpack that tended, I think, to a certain extent, get us to where we were when we were in the throes of that devastation. Okay? I come from a family with a, this thing is okay, excuse me. We come from a family where my mom was very domineering. My dad was very, very mild-mannered. And it always bothered me that my mom treated my dad that way. And I thought that I was mad at my mom. But through some counseling, what I realized is I was mad at my dad for letting my mom treat him that way. So we didn't unpack that baggage, really didn't talk about it, and it came back to bite us. Now, Joe came from a family that was just the opposite, a very domineering dad and a mild-mannered mom. So what did she think? I'm not going to let a man treat me the way my dad treated my mom, and I thought I'm not going to let a woman treat me the way that my dad treated my mom. And that caused all kinds of conflict in our marriage. Because any time that she did something that reminded me of how my mom treated my dad, I got angry. And that anger built because we never talked about it. And finally, it exploded into the place that we were during that ugly, ugly time. Make sure that you unpack your baggage and you discuss it. So number 3 is commit to the goal. Okay? Now, you can be involved. We were involved in church. We were involved in our marriage, but we weren't committed to our marriage. So there's a difference between involvement and commitment. So there was a chicken and a pig, and they were walking down middle America. I don't know, Kansas, Nebraska. You know, have you been through those parts? And this was a little bitty town. You know, just kind of one street, and there were some houses off to the side. Didn't have any franchise stuff. Didn't have any fast food restaurants. And there was one diner in the middle of this town, in the middle of that street. And they didn't have a neon sign. What they had is they had window art. Remember when they used to do that? And they used to actually do paintings and you know, writing on windows. And this little diner had some window art, and it said, "The All-American Breakfast, bacon and eggs, $3.99. And the chicken looked to the pig and said, "You know, pig, isn't it nice? Isn't it nice to be so involved in what makes America America that we are called the All-American Breakfast?" And the pig looked at the chicken and he says, "You know, for you it's involvement. For me it's total commitment." Because you see, you have to kill the pig to get the bacon, right? Well, I'm not saying you should die, but I'm saying you should be committed to your marriage, and there is a difference than being involved. We were involved. We were involved in church. We weren't committed. We were involved in the marriage. We weren't committed. You need to commit. We were doing a marriage conference, my wife and I said, you know what I would wish for everybody here? That we would create a bumper sticker that says, "Godly marriage, commit like a pig." You know, I thought that would be kind of neat. The problem was there were like 4 law enforcement people there, and they didn't think that was real funny, you know, commit like a pig. But, you know, anyway. So there's a great video that we have been showing for, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years when we have the workshops, and it talks about commitment. And I never tire of seeing it. So if we could do the commitment video, please. So I take it back. Don't commit like a pig, commit like Jesus. That's what we need. That's what we need to do. It really is. And that's what I wasn't doing during that time. And there were lots of times when I had to ask myself the question, when it seemed like it was intolerable, how bad do I want to be married? And I told Joe on many occasions that I was willing to do anything to save our marriage. I said, I'll go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. She says, you need a barrel? And we went there probably 5 years ago to Niagara Falls for the first time, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I hope she doesn't take me up on that promise. Yeah. So commit the way that Jesus does. We need to do that if we're going to have that godly marriage, that godly family. Number 4, understand and celebrate our differences. Now, there are lots of differences. I'm just going to talk about 2, and I can't really do them justice. But the first is gender differences. Now, I know I was born at night, but not last night, and I know that men and women are different. I understood that. I know that there's some anatomical differences there. What I didn't know is that there's a difference in the way women think, the way they process stuff. And I didn't take that into consideration. So there's a pastor, his name is Mark Gungor. He's from Puerto Rico, and he lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Not exactly the same climate as Puerto Rico. I don't know how he got there, but he did. And his claim to fame is he goes around and he does workshops, and it's called Laughing Your Way to a Better Marriage. Another wonderful video series that you can, I encourage you to watch at your home. And one of the sessions is called A Tale of Two Brains. And he talks about the difference between a woman's brain and a man's brain and how that causes turmoil and bad things in marriages if we don't understand and allow for that. Women's brains tend to connect everything together. He has a pink bust with the brain showing and a blue one for the man, but I didn't have time to go out and get that. So what I used is I went out in the garage and I got something that would represent a woman's brain. I don't want you to take any significance to the fact that this is smaller than the man's one that I'm going to show you, because it's probably just exactly the opposite. So a woman's brain is kind of like this package of bungee cords, these cords like this, and everything is connected to everything else. So what happens to a woman in the morning, what happens to a woman last week, is connected to what's happening today. Now, I believe that God doesn't make mistakes. He created women like this. Women are great multitaskers because of that. Is that not true? They do a better job than men do. But we have to realize that if we're going to have a godly marriage and we're going to meet each other's needs, we need to understand what is happening in a woman's brain. And we have to celebrate that, not get angry. Because, I'll go on about that in just a little bit. Now, a man's brain, on the other hand, right, hold on, guys. Okay, is compartmentalized, right? Is compartmentalized, and men have all the things that women have in their brains. All of those subjects and things that women have in their brain, they have it in theirs too. It's just that women's are connected one to another. Now, a man can talk about those things. He'll pull out that topic, being very careful not to touch any other topics. And when he's finished talking about that, he shoves it back in, right? And then he'll talk about another one, and so on and so forth. And women don't understand that. They really don't. I'm saying you need to study that. You need to talk about that. It's okay to talk about things like that. Don't bury those discussions. Now, the biggest box in a man's brain, you know what it is, ladies, right? What is it? It's the nothing box. It's the nothing box. And you know what is in the nothing box? Absolutely nothing, except maybe a remote. But even the remote, have you ever, guys, now tell me, be honest, have you ever, the remote's going like this and you don't even know what you're doing? It just keeps going. You keep going through the stations, keep going through the stations. And Jo wants to get into my nothing box. She does. She wants to decorate it and do all kinds of things. No, she does. And I can't let her in there because if she was in there, it wouldn't be a what? It wouldn't be a nothing box anymore. They've actually done brain studies. I know you, because you might not believe this. You say, well, that's kind of cute, funny, but it's not really true. It is true. They've connected electrodes, so they can measure brain activity. And a man's heart can be beating. Blood can be coursing through his veins. The lungs can be exchanging air and oxygen can be extracted, and there's no other brain activity going on. No, that's true. That's true. And Jo will come to me sometimes and says, what are you thinking? Nothing. How? She can't do that. She can't do that because everything is connected to something else. She can never be thinking of nothing. So you need to understand that these two people in a marriage, in a family, that are totally different. After a workshop, we had one lady, and so she went out and bought one of these. And she labeled them. And she put it on the island in the kitchen when he came home, and she'd have the box out. And she said to him, they had ground rules when they were sane. They had ground rules, and she said, okay, when you come home, you've got 30 minutes in your nothing box. And then we talk about this. And that worked for them because they started understanding what was happening in each of their brains in terms of differences. There are major differences that we have. The second difference that I want to talk about, and again, there's all kinds of these, but the second difference I want to talk about is personality differences. And I will tell you, I would have been a miserable failure in my career if I hadn't understood this. And it's something that we talk about all the time because opposites attract, and then after they attract, you tend to react, and the same thing that was enticing to you and you liked is the thing that will start, if you don't talk about it, will start driving you nuts. I mean, it will drive you nuts. And I do believe in the Rocky Balboa personality profile thing. Remember when he was talking about Adrian? She's got gaps. I've got gaps. Together we fill in the gaps. And that happens, but those gaps can cause tension in a marriage. They can keep you from having this godly marriage that we're talking about in Family Matters. So I want to talk about this, and this usually takes a couple hours. You guys have some time, right? Right? Okay. So can you guys see here? I don't know if you can see. So, there's lots of different personality profiles on the market. If you want to write a book, you just change the names, but they're all pretty much the same. They really are. And I would encourage you, because you can go online, you can get this stuff for free. And I would encourage you, husbands and wives, sons and daughters, to take these personality profiles and talk about them. And in fact, if you want to get a more accurate representation of what your personality style is, give it to somebody else and let them fill it out about you. Because you're where everybody wants to be. Well, I'm right here. I'm right in the middle. See, I'm the best of all worlds. I'm the best of all worlds. So if we look at these, axes, okay, this horizontal axis right here, this means I'm very assertive over here. This means I'm not very assertive. We know people like that, right? They're the people you go to a restaurant and they say, let's just save some time, let me order for everybody else. Right? And there are people that say, well, skip me here. Let the order first, because I can't make up my mind. I just can't make up my mind. And when they get around, you know what they'll say? Give me what they had. Okay? There are people like that, and you know that. Now, there's not a good or a bad. We all have strengths, and we all have weaknesses. But we better understand these strengths and weaknesses if we're going to have a healthy marriage. So over here, and this axis right here, is whether I'm reserved or whether I'm outgoing. Very reserved, very outgoing. Okay? So this right here, the choleric, one profile calls it a choleric, powerful choleric, or a driver, or a gold or a lion. They're all the same. Highly assertive, really reserved. Okay? What's most important for people right here? Most important thing for them is a task. They want to get the job done as quickly as possible. We all know people like that, right? Yeah. They're the kind of people, if we need a job done in 2 days, give it to one of these people. That's their strength. You know what their weakness is? They tend to be pushy. They tend not to you don't have to be that way. It's not an excuse. They tend not to think about other people's feelings. I've heard people say that their vehicle of choice is a bulldozer. Okay? If that person gets in a taxi, what's most important for that person? Get me there. Get me there. And in fact, during that taxi ride, Uber ride, I guess, during that Uber ride, you know what they're going to be doing? They're going to be working on something else. Because time is money. I can't let time be wasted. Okay? All right? Okay? If tension gets real high, you know what these people do? They attack. They confront. They take charge. The picture about the checkbook, you know, if that was a driver, if that was a cleric, what he would have said, you don't have to worry about balancing the checkbook. I'll write the checks from now on. That's what they do. That's how they release their tension. Okay, the melancholy, the analytic, the owl, the green, you know, all different profiles, the same thing. Not very assertive, and certainly very reserved. These people's biggest need is to be right. And I will tell you, they are right more than everybody else because they study things before they make a decision. You know who was a melancholy in the Bible? Thomas. Who was the guy that really, I know the others had faith, but who was the only man that really knew that was Jesus? I know the others knew it. But Thomas, because what did he have to do? He had to put his hands in the wounds in Jesus' side, right? He had to feel the nail holes in his wrists, okay? These are the people that are going to study stuff. In a taxi, you know what these people are going to do? They're going to tell the Uber driver, I keep saying taxi, they're going to tell the Uber driver, now I want to tell you this. Don't you try to take me the wrong way and charge me more money. I don't want you to do that because I've researched this. I have researched this and I know the answer to that and I know how much the charge should be. So don't do that to me. Right? Right? Okay. I'm going to tell you how that relates to my wife and I in just a minute. Okay, then we go to the phlegmatic, the amiable, the Labrador Retriever, or the blue. Okay, all the same thing. Not very assertive, but very outgoing. The most important thing for these people is relationships. Okay, in the taxi ride, you say, "How long did it take?" "Oh, I don't know." Which way did you go? I don't know. What'd you see? I didn't see any of that. What were you doing during that taxi ride? Sally and I had a good conversation, man. We're going to meet for tea. This is a woman, not me. We're going to meet for tea down the road because relationships are extremely important for these people. When push comes to shove and their tension gets too high, you know what they do? They just acquiesce. They're also passive resistors when it comes to that. Okay? The last personality style. The sanguine, also called the expressive, the orange, and then the animal that they use is an otter. You know the otters, how they play, they slide down the stuff. I don't know that you know about those, but that's kind of a neat thing. They have those things, they put it to music. And otters are just fun-loving people. Okay? The most important thing for a sanguine is to have fun. They do tend to exaggerate, okay? They tend to be arrogant. They think they're funnier than they really are. Actually, these are God's chosen people. Yes. Okay, so let's just talk about if you don't discuss these things in your family, And your kids have personalities too. I have 9 grandkids. 2 of those grandchildren are twins. Now, they spent this time in the same womb at the same time. One was born 1 minute before the other. Okay? They're as different as day and night. I think part of that is hardwired. Some of that is environmental, but they are different. And you treat them differently. You don't treat them, that's not being unfair. That's meeting their needs. So Joe, my wife, my lovely wife over there, is an analytic, a melancholy. Okay? I am a sanguine. I don't have a concrete sequential thought in my head. I don't. Joe asked me, in fact, I don't know what I am, and she was over there right before the service, and she says, "How long is your talk?" I don't know. I have no clue. She didn't time it? No, I didn't. I was in my nothing box, and I didn't. But I see, I never time that. How can we be out of money? We have checks left, right? That's my thing. Let's go to Disneyland. My dream job. I'm going to get it one of these days. If I don't die first, I'm going to be the guy on the Jungle Cruise. And now we come to the most dangerous part of our journey, the Los Angeles freeways. Don't blame that man. He's just trying to get ahead. You know, the guy, the headhunter. Remember, see all those things. And so my wife is this melancholy, and this is not a criticism. She was working. She was on staff at the church, and she would say and put in her closet what she was going to wear Monday. It was all set out. What she was going to wear Tuesday. What she was going to wear Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And that way. Shoot, when we go on a vacation, I'm lucky if I have pants. I don't pack. I don't think through those things. And so let me go back to our wedding day to show you how this plays out. And we wouldn't have survived if we didn't start talking about this fairly early on. So what does a woman have to do? She has to plan the reception and all that kind of stuff, and the dresses and what that's going to look like, and she did all that stuff. I didn't have much to do. Thank goodness I didn't have much to do. What did I have to do? I had to pick my groomsmen, buy a little gift for each one. I was planning the honeymoon. Okay, so we got a late start. They had an all-base alert out at Castle. It was before GPS, and I had planned to go to a place called the Brookdale Lodge in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Brookdale Lodge. There's a brook that actually runs through the dining room. It was going to be neat. I mean, it was neat. I was excited. This is a wedding night here. I'm excited. We got lost a couple times. Finally got there, and we pull into this Brookdale Lodge parking lot, and the lights are out, and there's no cars in the parking lot. And I said, sweetie, I said, just hold on. I'm going to go check this out. And I go up there, and there's a sign on the door. It says closed, back taxes. And I come back, and she says, I said, we got a problem here. The place is closed. And she said, I can't believe they didn't tell you that when you made reservations. I didn't make reservations. It's 11:30 at night, and I didn't make reservations. We wandered around. There wasn't a lot there. Couldn't go on the internet, couldn't Google anything. And we did find a Hilton. The problem was it was spelled Hylton. It was not part of the chain. When I went and asked, it was open though. When I went and asked the guy, he asked me if I wanted to rent it by the hour or the night. I sprang for the whole night, I'm telling you. And there was a mirror on the ceiling and cockroaches all over the place. Okay? So what I'm saying is we look at things through different lenses. This is a wonderful discussion on how to be successful in your relationship, in your marriage. Do that. It's free. Go on there and then discuss that and then plan, how can I better address the needs of my wife? How can I better address the needs of my husband? And I know I didn't time this. I'm running out of time. So real quickly, the fifth is communication. When there's dysfunction in any relationship, when there's dysfunction in a church, when there's dysfunction in a business, it doesn't matter. When there are people involved, I can almost guarantee you that there's a failure to communicate. We don't communicate well enough, okay? We need to listen. Pastor Jeff, I don't know, a couple of months ago, no, it was more than a couple of months ago, talked about the 5 things that we can do when we listen to other people, right? We can refuse to listen. That's what he said. We can pretend to listen, right? We can selectively listen. We can actively listen, and where we want to get is we want to listen with empathy. We want to get behind that person's eyes. And fellas, you're not paying attention when you turn the mute button on. You got to pay attention. You got to try to understand what your wife is saying. Ladies, you need to try to understand what your husband is saying. There's a 1 and 42-second video, and I want you to watch this. And I also want to tell you that 93% of what we communicate is nonverbal. It's not what we say, it's how we say it. Okay, 1 minute and 42 seconds. I want you to watch the nonverbals. I want you to listen to what this couple is saying one to another. Okay.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head. And it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way.
So what we had there is a failure to communicate, right? I mean, it's a silly little example, but what did she need from her husband? No, what she needed was him to listen to her and to understand what she was going through. Now, ultimately, she needs to get that nail out of her head, right? I mean, she's snagging all her sweaters, right? She is. There's pain there. But who has to decide to take the nail out of her head? She has to decide that. And I'm thinking that in this room, we've all had examples. We've all had examples of a nail in the head. So communication is extremely important, and we could do a whole workshop on communication that would take a number of hours, but we are out of, Joe says we're out of time. So real quickly, I want to tell you, let's say you fail. Are you going to fail? If you do what Pastor Jeff says, if you do what I say, are you going to have zero trouble in your marriage? You are. No, you're going to have trouble in your marriage. We're two imperfect people, and we have imperfect children, and we're going to have trouble. The Bible tells us in this life we are going to have trouble. We are going to have trouble. But there's a verse that has kept me going, and it's probably the verse everybody gets tired of me saying it all the time, and it's from James. And it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brother, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance." Now listen, this is important. "And perseverance must finish its work, so that you will be" what? "Mature and complete, not lacking anything." In other words, they're saying that we're not complete until we do that. You see, what I learned when I had that conversation with God was that when God was all I had, God was all I needed. But I had to persevere to get to that point. So I don't want you to go in the tank if you're going to have some failures in that marriage, some arguments, some hard times. But I want you to know that you can get through that. And I will tell you this, not that I wouldn't go back if there was a time machine to before I acted like that. But I will tell you that I'm a better person than I was before because of that, because I learned that I needed to depend on God. I want to end with Where did I put it here? With a real story. It'll take me about 3 minutes. Is that okay? Can I take 3 minutes? Okay. We were back. It was after our recovery. And we were back in Washington, D.C. And everybody was all excited because the speaker was a motivational speaker, and his name was Stedman Graham. I had no clue who Stedman Graham was. I was hoping he was a wide receiver for the Washington Redskins or somebody that I could relate to. He wasn't. You know who he is? He's Oprah Winfrey's boyfriend. Okay, I'd never watched Oprah Winfrey. And so he was a speaker. He's a great speaker. I know he was, but I don't remember a thing he said, but he did read a book. And I knew I had to have that book. I went to his booth. He'd already left for Chicago, back to Oprah. And I said, I need to know the name of that book. And I don't write things down. You know, I'm a sanguine. And I said, can you give me his number? So I called. I said, Stead. No, I didn't. His office gave me the number. It's called The Race. And I think this race can be compared to your family and your marriage. It says, quit. Get up, you're beaten. They shout at me and plead. There's just too much against you now. This time you can't succeed. And as I start to hang my head in front of failure's face, my downward fall is broken by the memory of a race. And hope refills my weakened will as I recall that scene, for just the thought of that short race rejuvenates my being. A children's race, young boys, young men, how I remember well. Excitement, sure, but also fear. It wasn't hard to tell. They all lined up so full of hope, each thought to win that race, or tie for first, or if not that, at least take second place. And fathers watched from off the side, each cheering for his son, and each boy hoped to show his dad that he would be the one. The whistle blew and off they went, young hearts and hopes afire. To win and be the hero there was each young boy's desire. And one boy in particular, whose dad was in the crowd, was running near the lead and thought, my dad will be so proud. But as they sped down the field across a shallow dip, the little boy who thought to win lost his step and he slept. Trying hard to catch himself, his hands flew out to brace, but mid the laughter of the crowd, he fell flat on his face. So down he fell, and with him hope, he couldn't win it now. Embarrassed, sad, he only wished to disappear somehow. But as he fell, his dad stood up and showed his anxious face, which to the boy so clearly said, get up and win that race. He quickly rose, no damage done, behind a bit, that's all, and ran with all his mind and might to make up for his fall. So anxious to restore himself, to catch up and to win, his mind went faster than his legs, and he slipped and he fell again. He wished then he had quit before with only one disgrace. I'm hopeless as a runner now. I shouldn't try to race. But in the laughing crowd, he searched and found his father's face, that steady look which said again, get up and win that race. So up he jumped to try again, 10 yards behind the last. If I'm to gain those yards, he thought, I got to move real fast. Exerting everything he had, he regained 8 or 10, but trying so hard to catch the lead, he slipped and he fell again. Defeat, he lay there silently, a tear dropped from his eye. There's no sense running anymore. 3 strikes, I'm out. Why try? The will to rise had disappeared, all hope had fled away. So far behind, so error-prone, a loser all the way. I've lost, so what's the use? He thought, I'll live with my disgrace. But then he thought about his dad, who'd soon he'd have to face. Get up, an echo sounded low. Get up and take your place. You were not meant for failure here. Get up and win that race. With borrowed will, get up, it said. You haven't lost it all, for winning is no more than this, to rise each time you fall. So up he rose, to run once more, and with a new commit, he resolved that win or lose, at least he wouldn't quit. So far behind the others now, the most he'd ever been, still he gave it all he had and ran as though to win. 3 times he'd fallen stumbling, 3 times he rose again. Too far behind to hope to win, he still ran to the end. They cheered the winning runner as he crossed the line first place, head high and proud and happy, no falling, no disgrace. But when the fallen youngster crossed the line last place, the crowd gave him the greater cheer for finishing the race. And even though he came in last with head bowed low and proud, you would have thought he'd won the race to listen to the crowd. And to his dad he sadly said, I didn't do too well. To me you won, his father said. You rose each time you fell. And now when things seem dark and hard and difficult to face, the memory of that little boy helps me in my race. For all of life, for all of marriage, for all of family, is like that race with ups and downs and all you have to do to win is rise each time you fall. Now, they're not talking about our Heavenly Father, but I think they could be. I do think they could be. So if you're struggling, if you do fall, if you stumble, after you've got all this stuff at your disposal, you've got it all in your toolbox, I don't want you to despair. I want you to finish that race. Thank you very much. Can I pray for you, please? Okay. Father, we thank you. We thank you that we don't have to try to do things on our own. Father, I would just pray that our hearts would be open, that we would realize that the person that needs to give our direction, that the person that needs to set our priorities is you, that we need to look to you, that you're there to help us when we fall. Thank you, Father, that you sent your Son to die for people like me who blow it and have blown it before and maybe will blow it again. So thank you for that. Thank you for your love. Thank you for the folks here this evening. And I just ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.